such a pleasure to be with you all again, and with Chris. We are actually good friends in real life, and it's a pleasure. Let's see, we don't want that to fall over. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. It's really a pleasure to have this kind of conversation, and particularly this year. 45 years or so I've been involved in politics. This is the battle that is more clearly defines a contrast of values than any I have ever participated in or experienced. There are two very different visions represented by the candidates of their underlying value systems, of their vision for society, and two very different people with different life experiences. And those things play themselves out in the policies that they propound for the development of our society. The real question here is, are we going to have a society where we believe we are all in this together, where we are our brothers and sisters' keeper, or one where we're all in this alone, where the highest value is on individual success to the exclusion of our obligations to each other? Mitt Romney selected Paul Ryan to be his running mate, who has become the intellectual center of much of the what I would call the far right in the House in the United States. Ryan said, to give you a glimpse of his attitude about values, Ayn Rand, more than anyone else, did a fantastic job, this is his quote, explaining the morality of capitalism, the morality of individualism. If Ayn Rand were here today, I think she would do a great job in showing us just how wrong what government is doing is. Now, you all, I suspect, are pretty familiar with Ayn Rand. When she was still alive, she's the author of Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead, kind of the intellectual foundation of a lot of the far right in the United States. I think she did share some of your views that you don't have to be religious, but unfortunately, she went in a little different direction. In an interview with Mike Wallace some years ago, Wallace asked her, said, Christ and every other important moral leader in man's history has taught us that we should love one another. What then is this kind of love in your mind is immoral? And she said, it's immoral if it is placed above one's own self. That's her view. That was her view, clearly expressed. And Paul Ryan is a real acolyte of her view, makes all this new staff read her book. Now that's a clear set of values, and Mitt Romney shares those values in many respects. And all you have to look at is the kind of things he has done with his life. From Bain Capital, where the goal was to service investors and, frankly, himself, notwithstanding the impact on thousands of workers, to his attitudes about economic policy. Now, let me get to that. We've had two experiments in economic policy in the last 30 years. There was the Clinton period, when he passed modest increases on taxes on the wealthiest people in the United States, and invested heavily in education and passed stimulus programs for the economy. And at the time he passed that budget, there were people on the floor of the House, I remember just distinctly like yesterday, said this will lead us to a Great Depression. Well, what happened was, of course, the most prosperous period in human history. Seriously. His term ended with a budget surplus. It's not like this is a mystery how to get a surplus. It ended with gross domestic product going up. It ended with poverty as a percentage of the population going down. It ended with the creation of many, many jobs, 20-some-odd million new jobs over his term. It ended with an unemployment rate that was modest. And we've begun to crawl back from this horrible situation that started with Reagan administration, where productivity and gross domestic product were going up, but average wages were going down because all of the new income was going to the top 1-2% of the population. Then came George Bush, and George Bush put in practice trickle-down economics that he inherited from the 1980s. He cut taxes for the wealthiest people in America. He said all the trickle-down would rain on all of us. It didn't. We ended the decade during which he was president with 0 private sector job growth. 0. First time in our history. And the net effect was that because of the deregulation of the financial industry and the fact that all the new wealth went to the top 1%, because if all the wealth that's generated by higher productivity goes to the top 1% of the population, you don't have enough money among consumers to buy products. So the economy stagnates. And what happened? We had a giant financial collapse. It was that collapse that Barack Obama inherited. And he put in place policies much more similar to Clinton, but also much more focused on building a long-term economy that builds from the bottom out, from the middle class out, not from the top down. And we've made some progress over that time, over the last 3.5 years. I mean, there have been 5.2 million jobs created. Compare that to the 0 private sector jobs created by Bush. We'd have had a lot more if the American Jobs Act had been passed, which the President proposed 1.5 years ago, and which Congress intentionally tried to prevent passage because, frankly, the Republicans in Congress have been sabotaging the economy in order to win the election. So on the economic side, you have a clear set of choices. 2 experiments. One successful, one failed. Do we want to really go backward to the failed policies of the Bush administration when it comes to economics? And let's look at foreign policy. Do we really want to go back to the failed policies of the Bush administration when it comes to foreign policy? The people who surround Mitt Romney are the same neocons who brought us the war in Iraq. If you like the war in Iraq, you'll love Romney's attitude toward foreign policy. Dan Senior, his chief spokesman, the chief spokesman for the Iraq war, my friends, is his chief foreign policy advisor. What? I mean, all he has to, this, by the way, is the most inexperienced duo to run for president in foreign policy since World War II in the United States. And you can tell, because he shoots first and aims later. Then you get to things like Social Security and Medicare. Those values play out there too. Here we have, on the one hand, an advocate of privatization of Social Security. That would have been swell during the economic collapse when 40%, 50% of people's pensions disappeared. On the one hand, and somebody who's committed to the guaranteed benefits of Social Security. Or to Medicare, where Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney's embraced this, wants to voucherize Medicare, eliminate Medicare as we know it and replace it with a voucher system. That won't guarantee anything, and all the independent studies say we'll raise out-of-pocket costs by like $6,000 a year for seniors. Oh, it's not going to affect current seniors, they say. Just people who are 54 and below who've paid in for 20 years already into their Social Security and Medicare funds. And then you get to Obamacare. Mitt Romney, of course, actually proposed and passed a similar proposal, but now he's totally against Obamacare that would prevent people from going bankrupt for financial reasons for the first time in the United States. Allow us to join the civilized world by providing universal health care. Says he'll veto it. Says we'll end it. Or Romney's attitude toward let Detroit go bankrupt. That would have worked well compared to the president's bold action to rescue the American auto industry that is now paying massive benefits in terms of American jobs and the lives of American workers. Or his proposal to let the housing market hit bottom. Let people fend for themselves. Or his answers about education. Having a hard time going to college? Borrow from your parents. Maybe if your parent was the head of American Motors. Or what about his proposals to defund Planned Parenthood? His pandering to the far right, his party. His absolute opposition to abortion. He's supported the personhood amendment that would ban abortion in all cases, not excluding rape and incest, and would also ban about half of contraception, all hormonal contraception in the United States. We were relitigating the issue of whether or not we should be promoting contraception in the United States during the primary campaign. In 2012, my friends. Many of these same people, by the way, the people who will dominate the Republican caucus in Congress if Mitt Romney is elected, do we really think he will stand up to them, even if he didn't agree on everything? Or then you look at immigration. Clear choice. The president has totally committed to immigration reform and has acted forcefully to provide deferred action to dreamers. The dreamers, these are kids who are brought here as children and have lived in no other country but this one, and no other country. And Mitt Romney's attitude toward them is he would veto the DREAM Act, he would end the deferred action program the president's put in place if he's elected, although he would allow those who apparently have been granted deferred action to keep them. And he says, well, we'll solve this in a comprehensive way. What? By requiring people to what is it, self-deport by making their lives so miserable through Arizona-type laws? I mean, those are the kind of policy choices we get. And we get very different life experiences between these two people. Obama, child of a single mom, middle-class family, made his own on his own, went to Harvard Law School. And then what did he do? He didn't go to a Wall Street bank. He became a community organizer in the south side of Chicago, working with steel workers who lost their jobs. He ran Project Vote here to get people registered to vote. That's what he did with his Harvard Law degree, until he decided to devote himself to politics. On the other hand, you have Romney, who is, with all due respect, frankly doesn't have a sense of what it's like to be a middle-class person. Son of an auto CEO, became fabulously wealthy at Maine Capital, where the sole goal was benefiting his investors and himself. Whether it's outsourcing jobs, whether it's sending jobs overseas, whether it's laying people off, whether it's making people build a stage where they announce their jobs are gone. If he's elected president, he's going to do the same thing. He will act to benefit the investors in his campaign, and he has shown that he will say or do pretty much whatever he thinks will benefit himself personally, politically. We can't afford that any more than those workers could that lost their jobs when he was at Maine Capital. He's proposed tax changes for another $5 trillion tax cut that they can't tell us how they add up, because he would have to burden the middle class with higher taxes that would happen also to benefit himself and his friends. He's talked about the 47%, where he revealed what I believe are his true views on the values that he represents. That 47% of the population can't be convinced to take responsibility for their lives. We're talking about people who are senior citizens who've worked their whole lives. We're talking about soldiers today. We're talking about vets. We're talking about all those people who get on those trains in the morning. You ride the train in the morning at 5 o'clock midnight. See who's on those trains. It's all those people who work those hard menial jobs, who work their ass off, 2 jobs a day. They're not taking responsibility for their lives. There's a lot at stake in this election. And to close, how much time am I getting? That much.
You're doing great.
To close, let me just tell you a quick story. This great book on planetary science by this guy named Greenspoon. It's about extraterrestrial life. Where the hell am I going with this? I'll tell you. He's he's a scientist, does this from a scientific point of view. And at the end of this book, he postulates that sentient civilizations out there must all go through a gauntlet, where the question is, do their value systems and their political decision-making structures, do they keep up with the technological expansion that allows their increased technological power? If they do, they could enter into this period of extraordinary freedom and possibility. If they don't, they probably become near evolutionary dead ends like the Neanderthals. About 60 years ago, we entered that in this world, when our technological capability allowed us to destroy the planet, change our climate. We're in the midst of this generation, I think, the next, will decide whether we make it through that gauntlet. And this decision in 3 weeks will have a lot to say about that, because we're electing the most powerful person on the planet. So I think we should all vote for Barack Obama. Thank you very much.